Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Welcome again, everyone. I hope you all had a good sit, whatever that is. One thing I think is really interesting about meditation, a sort of clear kind of pointer to meditation when we're meditating, is that we're present in this moment. You know, for me, that's a really significant aspect of meditation. And we can know, in a way, like if we're meditating effectively or meditating in a way that's following the Buddha's teaching, that we are actually resting, that we're actually attending to, we're paying attention to the present moment. You know, it's a kind of simple way of looking at it, because whatever's happening for us in our meditation, whatever we're aware of it now. It's happening now. And when we have the sense of losing track, or sort of we're not practicing so well, we're not so mindful, it's when we're not in the present moment. We've gone off, gone off somewhere. I mean, of course we are, you know, present moment is still there, but we might be in the past. We might be remembering something from long ago, or just recently even, but we're not here then. We're referring back to something that's already happened. It's over already. So there's this sort of movement away from the present moment, right? When we get caught up in thoughts of the past, and equally we can get caught up in thoughts of the future, and then we're off. You know, there's a sense of going off. We've lost the present. You know, we're speculating or worrying or planning. You know, plotting and planning the future, trying to imagine how it's going to be, which is seldom how it turns out. So it's also can be quite disappointing to do too much of that, because the future doesn't tend to follow our wishes and plans. It's not in our control. But anyway, the point is that when we're thinking about the past or thinking about the future, we're sort of off, away from, out of the present moment. So it's quite a good kind of pointer in a way to consider, you know, am I present? Am I aware of the present moment? Am I in the present moment? And actually there's quite a few suttas. There's a whole series of suttas actually in the Majjhima Nikaya where the Buddha is talking about present moment awareness. They're called the Bhaddekaratta Suttas. And there's 4 of them, 4 in a row. 131 to 134 in Majjhima, and they're all actually in a way the same, but the circumstances in which the teaching was given is slightly different in each one. So there are different characters who are receiving the teaching, and the Buddha gives the teaching, I think, in 1 or 2 of them, but then in the others somebody else is repeating this teaching. I can't quite remember, but you can have a look. Homework. It's quite interesting to see. Why is the sutta repeated 4 times? It's really interesting. It gives a sort of, for me, a sense of a significance. You know, it's like once wasn't enough. It's like the Satipatthana Sutta comes twice in the Majjhima Nikaya and in the Digha Nikaya. It gives an added kind of significance to this sutta. And in the same way, the Bhaddekaratta Sutta, so 4 times. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but actually 4 times it's repeated. So that for me is really quite powerful. And when you look at it, actually what's repeated is a beautiful verse that the Buddha gave. So it's a teaching in the form of a verse. And of course, the Buddha seemingly was able to give teachings in verse form. In the Pali language, it's not like a rhyming thing, so it's not so amazingly difficult to do. It's more like the words in Pali have a beautiful rhythm to them. They flow in a beautiful way, and that's what a Pali verse is like. So it doesn't rhyme, but it has a meter, it has a rhythm, and it's compelling, actually. Honestly, it's worth reading the Pali. It's worth learning Pali, quite honestly. Slowly. It's not that difficult, because when you read it, or you don't even have to understand it to be able to read it and appreciate the brilliance of these kind of verses, because they just have this beautiful kind of rhythm and melody to them, and it's powerful. And so there are many verse form teachings from the Buddha. For instance, the Dhammapada, which probably many of you have heard of, it's all verses, isn't it? Usually 4-line verses. What are they called? Quatrains or something like that. And then the Itivuttaka, the Udana, short, powerful, short utterances from the Buddha. They're really worth looking at. Sometimes just 2 lines, but in verse form. So the Buddha often spoke in verse, and so did some of the disciples of the Buddha. There's one called Vangisa, who had a real skill. He was a poet. He was like a bard. He was a Buddhist bard. And it's really sweet. I am digressing, but I must tell you, it's so sweet because the Buddha would give a teaching. And there's a whole series of Vangisa's teachings. I think it's in the Samyutta Nikaya. The Buddha would give a teaching, and Vangisa would be so enthusiastic, so enthused and excited and uplifted by the teaching that he would burst into verse. And he would say, before he did that, he would say, Lord, Lord, to the Buddha, I have something I really would like to share with everybody. And the Buddha would say, go ahead, Vangisa. And then Vangisa would burst into these beautiful verses, very poetic language. He was able to do that spontaneously, seemingly. So he was like a bard, you know. And anyway, back to the Bhaddekaratta Suttas, these 4 suttas, which is really just a verse that's repeated 4 times. And then the circumstances of when the teaching was given, it varies from sutta to sutta. And in this verse, which I can't remember word for word, but the whole gist of it is about present moment awareness, cultivating present moment awareness. The name of the suttas, Bhaddekaratta, actually means something like, it's variously translated, but it could mean one single excellent night, or it could mean one single excellent attachment. So you think, attachment? Is there any good attachment? I like that translation because it gives you, it's a bit dissonant. It's like, surely the Buddha was telling us not to get attached to anything at all, to let go of absolutely everything. But in this teaching, the Buddha is actually saying there is just one thing that you can quite profitably develop attachment to. And of course, that's the present moment, present moment awareness. So it's a great translation, but it could equally mean one single excellent night. And in these verses, the Buddha is essentially saying, don't dwell in the past. The past is gone. It's over already. So if you dwell in the past, you're just suffering. And he said, don't run into the future, because the future is yet to come. And there's no way that we can tell what's coming next. And I'll say more about that later, because you're probably thinking, well, surely we have to plan sometimes. Surely we have to actually put our thoughts ahead and responsibly think about the future from time to time. But this is the teaching. Don't run into the future. The future is yet to come. And he said, what we should be doing, how we should be practicing, is to dwell in the present moment. He said, invincibly, unshakably. And then he went on to say, we never know when the hordes of Mara may come. Mara meaning death. So we never know when death may come. It could be at any time. Who knows? So therefore, we should give all our energy, all our attention to this present moment. It could be the last one. It could be the only one left to us. And these verses are very beautifully poetic, and you're just going to have to go and look them up and read them. And maybe read them in the Pali, just read them out and take in the beauty of the rhythm of these verses. But to understand, look at the English translation. I think it's a very helpful teaching, actually. It's a very helpful point. It's very simple, isn't it, for us just to consider present moment awareness. There's a very great teacher who's not a Buddhist, but who's wonderfully wise and very highly attained person who's written a whole book called The Power of Now. Have you heard of that? What's his name? He's German. Thanks. I'm terrible with names. Eckhart Tolle. And he's really an amazing person. He's obviously lots of teachings, and he's got a lot of online teachings. And I love to watch him because he's completely present. And somebody asked him once, what do you like to do in your spare time? Which is quite an interesting question. And he said, nothing. What does he really like to do? He likes to do nothing. This is a person who's completely contented, who's completely comfortable, who's completely fine with the present moment. And actually, he said, more specifically, he said, I like to just sit and do nothing. I like to just be. It's really lovely to do nothing. And he said, I like to sometimes just look out of the window, but just basically no agenda, nothing to do. And I find that quite a good teaching. And it's, genuinely from the heart, no doubt, this is how he feels. Because really meditation, the whole practice of meditation for us, it's kind of learning, isn't it, to do nothing and to be fine with that, And how many of us really can feel that way? It's not always easy to meditate, because it can be a real challenge, can't it, just to sort of make the space for meditation, actually, because we like to do things, we like to be involved in things, and life is in many ways a great adventure for us. But it's a kind of, when we start practicing and we start to develop this willingness to renounce the world, to give up doing, and we're just here, we're just being, we start to get a taste for that, don't we? And it starts to become quite pleasant to be just sitting peacefully. And even it can become quite interesting, quite good to sit and feel what's going on even when it's not peaceful. Just to notice what's happening. Notice the sense of kind of restlessness, maybe. The sense of planning for the future. The way the mind is actually quite, it has quite a tendency, doesn't it, to move into the past or into the future, into speculation, into all sorts of ideation. And, it can be quite interesting for us to be able to begin, to see how this is going on all the time for us. And actually to recognize that there is that possibility of being present to be present in the present moment, even as we're observing these kind of phenomena arising and passing. And there's a real taste of freedom in there, isn't there? Because we actually slowly but surely start to identify more with the part of the mind that is observing, that is present, that is right here, that is attending to whatever else is going on. And there's a process then of kind of disengaging, disentangling, isn't there? And it's peaceful, it's pleasant, it's very, very nourishing for us. And we recognize that there's a sense of freedom and a sense of letting go of the past, letting go of the future. And coming back to, the sorts of ways in which we can understand this in terms of our everyday life. In our everyday life, we do have to think ahead to a certain extent, don't we? We all do that. Get tickets and plan trips and suss out, look after, how to look after our old age and how to look after our families if anything happens to us, and so on and so on and so on. There's a lot of necessity really to project forwards into the future. And yet, does this have to be an obstacle for us? Does this have to take us away from this teaching of the Buddha, not to run into the future? I don't think it does. I think it's a matter of being present while we're planning for the future. And we can do that, can't we? So, it's like this question comes up again and again with people. How can I practice how can I not go into the future? Well, you don't have to not go into the future, but you just have to be present while you're thinking about the future. So we can be thinking about the future and planning, but still very present. And part of that for me is body awareness. It's a big part, actually. For me, a big part of present moment awareness is being aware of the body. It's so helpful because when we're aware of the body, we are aware of the present, because the body is always present. Consider that. The body's never in the future and it's never in the past. It can't do that. Physical form can't do that. It can only be here and now. And feelings also can only be here and now. So that's really helpful for us. And that's why a lot of teachings and a lot of teachers will encourage this, body and feelings as the foundations, as the real resource for our mindfulness, because they're always here and now. And that is so, so anchoring, so supporting for us, for our attention, for our mindfulness. Thinking, on the other hand, is often not here and now. So we can just make that distinction. And it's kind of helpful just to notice how thinking will be that which takes us away, takes us out of the present moment. But if we're able to be aware of the body and feelings, then we can be doing all sorts of mental work and we can still be present. And the way it often works is that we may be thinking of something, doing work, thinking about the future, planning, to be able to come back to the body from time to time and just breathe deep. Come back to this moment. We can all do that. And it's really interesting how, for me, when we're able to be aware of the body, aware of the breath even, coming back again and again to the body and breath in our everyday life, our plans and thoughts about the future have a lighter feel to them. They're not so solid for us. They can't be. They can't be, because we're constantly being reminded of what's real. And we can make our plans, but we don't have to, be caught up in them. We don't have to be grasping them. And probably for many of you, you will relate to this. When we have a good practice, when we're coming again and again to the present moment and being with what is and letting go of anything else, then when the future doesn't turn out quite as we hoped or wished, or our plans fall apart in some way, something else comes along, completely coming in from somewhere unexpected, we're not so shaken by that. We're not so disturbed. We're not so disappointed. And this is really apparent, when we practice. We can start to really let go of the future, in short. And how helpful is that? Because the future's so not in our hands, and there'll always be surprises, Things never quite work out as we expect, do they? Or very rarely. And so we have a kind of resource that's right here for us, which is present moment awareness. It somehow helps us to really let go of past and really let go of future. Make peace with the fact that there's only this. There's only this. It's like going up the mountain today. We go up this mountain and we took a wrong path and we ended up going much further than we'd expected to. And it was a slog, but a wonderful slog. But it's interesting how, coming down, for instance, we knew how far we had to come down, considerable distance. But what was interesting to me was that there was a lot of present moment awareness of each step and all the different things that we were seeing on the way down. So much beauty, so many amazing small wildflowers and interesting plants and little creatures. And when the attention was on these momentary experiences on the way down, it was just so exquisite. There's just this. And the sense of what's happened and what's yet to happen. And the knees, are the knees going to kind of manage to last the course? These kind of thoughts just fade away. And it's just, this is what, look at that. Quite exquisite, quite amazing moments. And that for me is a real teaching. It's like, actually, if we can really be here, really be now, the power of now, allow the power of now to be present for us, then really life is quite extraordinary, isn't it? Because there really is just this moment. And if we can fully kind of open and receive and really, in a way, honor, this present moment, we can really live. We can really be alive. And whenever we're not doing that, we're not quite fully alive to the moment. We're not fully here. And so to be able to live in the present moment is really to make the most of this opportunity that we have. And the practice goes on when there's present moment awareness. There's the beautiful story, isn't there, of, is it a Zen monk who falls over a cliff? This story, and he's holding on. He just manages to grab a root, and he looks down, and there's just this sheer drop. And then a tiger. Is it a tiger? Some creature. A tiger's at the top of the cliff. Oh my goodness. And then a little rat starts gnawing at the root that he's holding on to, or the vine, or whatever. Oh dear. Desperate situation. If he tries to go up, he'll be eaten by a lion, or a tiger. If he holds on where he is, he's going to this rat's going to destroy the vine and he's going to fall. Or he could just let go and fall. Desperate. What does he do? He notices. Is it a strawberry or something, some beautiful flower or piece of fruit that's growing right there, and his full attention is on this item. Such delight. And that's a really interesting example of present moment awareness, how one can be in potentially worrying, anxious, anxiety-provoking situations. To be honest, that's the case, isn't it? To be honest, that's how it is for all of us. It really is, isn't it? If you think ahead, you look ahead, if we're aware of what's ahead of us, if we want to be aware of what's ahead of us, if we want to really open to that, then there may be a bit of a shake and a quake in the heart. There may be fear. We're all going to die. And we're all going to possibly get sick. We might all get old if we're lucky. This is the future. And, you know, so it's a bit like we're hanging on, but the rat is gnawing away at the vine, you know. At some point, it's going to break and we're going to fall. Death is on its way. Death is coming. And it's actually very good to be aware of that, to be conscious of that. Why? Because it helps us to come back to the present moment. Life is so short. Life is so precious. We don't have that much time. So we can really have a sense of samvega, kind of urgency, a sense of the preciousness, the imminence of this moment, you know, make the most of it. So it's really interesting, as it's quite a paradox. If we really consider, genuinely consider, I mean, realistically consider the future, then it can be either a source of great anxiety, or it can bring us back, bring us home to this moment. In a way, that kind of anxiety is an impulse, or it impels us to come home to this moment. How helpful is that? So actually in Buddhism, we're encouraged to consider Maranasati, we're encouraged to consider death every day, every day. This one, you know, this one will come to an end. And so will all the others, all that we love, all that we hold to as dear, you know. And it's really a very helpful reflection. It's not a morbid reflection when we really allow ourselves to reflect. I find it interesting that consideration of aging, sickness, and death, the idea of it can be really quite off-putting. But when we actually seriously bring in these realities and allow them to kind of permeate our consciousness, contemplate them, then they're not morbid at all. No, because the truth is always valuable for us, isn't it? No, they help us. They're actually aids, they're encouragements for this reflection that the Buddha's giving in the Bhaddekaratta Sutta, you know, to invincibly, unshakably dwell in the present moment. It's a kind of paradox to me. We're being asked to consider the future, but it's in order to help us to be present, which is, this is all we have. This is it. In The Power of Now, this book by Eckhart Tolle, he really, it's a beautiful book. I so recommend. Probably most of you have read it. It's just superb. The whole of his kind of approach is to make much of the present moment. And it really works. And it really is a helpful reflection. The Buddha taught in so many ways, as we know, but these Bhaddekaratta Suttas, with this emphasis on present moment awareness, are really helpful, really wonderful. And we can notice, you know, how in our meditation practice, as I said, the body and the feeling aspect of our reality helps us to anchor in this moment. And then we can observe the mind. We can observe how it moves, where it takes us. And we can, it's almost like we can be watching that from the present moment awareness. And then this amazing purification process can happen, because as we are able to observe thinking without following thinking, we can see how the Dhammas, these Dhammas, are arising and passing, arising and passing. And as they arise and pass, we are recognizing we're not that, we're not this. No, there's a letting go of all that identification, all that grasping, all that suffering. That's what it is. So back to planning the future and how we can do what we need to do. We can deal with the past and deal with the future in whatever ways we need to, but do it with this presence. And I often find that people say that, when we have some kind of like a decision to make, we have a future possibilities ahead of us, like forks in a road. We're going along the road and we have to choose which direction are we going to go in. How do we determine? How do we make choices, life choices, when we don't really know what the future holds? So we can only speculate. Is this the right thing, the right job, the right decision, or should I do the other? And it can cause an enormous amount of difficulty for us sometimes. We don't really know which way we should go. And there may be more than two choices. There may be 3 or 4 or more. And we can think a lot about what might happen in each possibility. And we can play mental games like, if I choose A, I'll just see how that is. I'll just spend a week imagining that I'm going to do that and see how that is. And then I'll have to go to the next one. And all of this cogitation happens for us, and doubt and anxiety and so forth. None of that's wrong, obviously, but it's just a way of speculating and considering about the future, a way of making decisions. But there is another way of making a decision, which you'll be very familiar with, I'm sure, which is to meditate, which is to, have maybe a very compelling sense of needing to decide something, needing to move forward in a particular way. And instead of giving all our mental energy to that consideration, what can we do? We can sit, and we can be willing to let go of the conundrum that we're facing. Sometimes it's very difficult to stop thinking about such important matters, but to be able to do that is a great gift. Just to come back to the meditation, close the eyes, come back to the body, breathe, and let it go. Let it go. And every time the mind wants to come back to this compelling issue, this difficulty, this question, notice that sense of urgency, maybe. Notice that sense of need to pursue something, and just let it go. Come back to the body, back to the breath. And we can start to do things like notice how it feels. Notice how it feels when the mind moves forward into this issue. And just keep attending to what's happening in the body. What's happening in the heart? How does it feel? What's the quality, the emotion, the mood, the tone, and so forth? And in this way, we're able to broaden the view, aren't we? So that rather than just simply using the rational mind to make our decisions, we get to deepen and broaden and open the whole thing and really feel deeply, gut feelings. It's not a thinking process. It's not about thinking. It's much wider than that. It's like, instead of dealing with the surface issues, we're diving deeply into this mind and body and just allowing space, allowing time, not forcing the decision, but letting things kind of percolate, letting things evolve, letting things kind of, in a way, it's a bit like stepping back, isn't it? And allowing issues to deal with themselves. That's really what happens in a way. It's like, to really be able to let go of compelling issues, to be able to actually give space and time and patiently just be with how we feel moment to moment. It's very interesting how these decisions will often kind of make themselves, won't they? Things will sort of fall into place in some way, and it becomes quite obvious at some point that this is what's going to happen. To me, that's very wonderful. It's almost like inviting intuition. It's inviting different forces to come in and to help to determine how things are actually going. And I almost get the sense that we don't really make decisions at all. We just think we do. We just think we do because we think. But oftentimes, when we can really practice with the mind and let go of thinking, be willing to release the mind from thinking, then we can notice that the flow of life, the movement of life, the movement of each moment by moment, is a quite natural flow, and it has its own momentum and it has its own kind of life. And if we can actually just sort of allow that to happen and not get involved, not try and come in and tweak and fine-tune and control and imagine that we have a clue what's going on, actually, then things will tend to flow very smoothly and well, because it's like we're allowing nature to manifest, Dhamma, to manifest. So it's really interesting to me, this sense of agency, the sense of having any control at all over the future and the way that things are going. It can really start to disentangle when we practice, when we give more priority to practice and just allow this kind of relaxing into the moment to happen. Attending to the moment is the most important thing we can do. Nothing else really matters, honestly. But if we really attend to the moment and we're really present moment by moment, then we're allowing life to do what it needs to do. And it's really like recognizing the reality that, there's no driver of this car. This vehicle's moving of its own accord. It always was, it always will be. We can just start to recognize that. And something about feeling how we feel. If we can really tune into what's happening here in a holistic way through our practice, how is the body? What is being felt? What is happening here? If we really can tune into that, it's a tremendous guide for us. This intuition, this sense of gut instinct, or, these levels at which there's so much understanding, there's so much insight, there's so much awareness, on all these different levels, how much we can kind of let go of our, in a way, almost addiction to the rational mind, to the sense of knowing what's what. because it's so limited. It's so limited. It's got us into all sorts of trouble as a species. As a species, we're our love of control and to be able to manipulate reality, to be able to get what we want, to think things through and to figure things out, and we're brilliant at all of that. But it's got us into a lot of trouble because we're not paying attention to all these other aspects of reality. We're not really recognizing how much we're part of nature, and we flow with nature, and nature's in control, not us. And so much harm and damage can be done when we're dissociated from all these different levels of reality, and we can associate with them. We can kind of renew the relationship, revitalize this relationship with nature through our body awareness. Our bodies are telling us, our bodies are part of nature. And so in this way, we can really help ourselves so much to understand how to live in a harmonious way, in a skillful way, in a complete way, in a happy way, in a way of letting go. When we can allow our attention to come out of this rational mind, to not give it so much importance, and to allow ourselves to dwell in nature, dwell in the body, dwell in feelings, be holistic in our approach to life, and see where that takes us. Trusting, we can really trust. When the Buddha became the Buddha, when he became enlightened, I love that the first thing he did was touch the earth. He touched the earth. And for me, that speaks volumes. It's hugely significant. I'll leave that with you. Amen. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.